Let's talk about the basics of production music. So, if you are thinking about turning your music over to a music library to hopefully get some TV placements, film placements, advertising placements, whatever it's going to be, what we're doing here is we're creating what we call production music, specifically handed over to a music library for the use of production companies to put that music in the foreground, in the background, in all different types of places, okay? So that is the term that we use on this side of the business. So let's get into the basics of what this is all about. So the first thing is that it is a type of music that is created specifically for TV and film placements, okay? So we need to make sure that there are a lot of things we can take with us, let's say from the world of creating just original artist music, or maybe we were making beats for other, rappers or singers, or maybe just, in our bands, we were creating original music. There's a lot of that. I'd say probably 60 to 70% of that we do take with us into the TV film world for production music. But there's definitely this like 30 to 40% where you need to kind of have some special considerations and produce music in a very particular way to ensure you're not just kind of making music for your own benefit, but actually you're making music that's going to increase the value of a TV show or a commercial or a movie. And you really want to be spending your time creating the right types of production music so that all this work you're putting into your, the albums that you're maybe cranking out for these libraries don't end up just sitting on their shelf collecting digital dust and not getting placements. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about how to ensure you make the right kind of production music in this presentation. Generally, in the production world, for the TV film world, it essentially follows the popular music charts. So if you go to Billboard, which kind of is relevant still, but anything that's essentially trending, top 50, top 100 tracks, if you're using Spotify or YouTube Music or Google Play or whatever it is you're doing to find popular music, anything that's basically on a chart for a popular streaming service, you'll be able to see what the hot songs are and who the hot artists are. The TV film world, and particularly libraries, they essentially in many ways follow that. So I remember many years ago, dubstep blew up with Skrillex and a bunch of other, really popular producers back in 2012, 2013. And sure enough, lo and behold, all the libraries that I worked with suddenly started asking for dubstep music because the TV film world follows the music industry as well. So you have to understand that music is sort of the tastemaker, right? So if there's an artist that breaks through, really popular, everybody loves them. Well, if you're a brand, let's say you're putting together a car commercial and this song is tying directly into the demographic that you want to sell your car to, a lot of times these advertisers and the agencies want to really kind of tap into that and say, hey, we want people to hear this song and see our commercial and tie the fact that they love this popular song to maybe they're going to love our product or our service, okay? So it's just advertising association 101. Now, sometimes they will go pay lots of money for those popular artist tracks, but a lot of times they can't afford it. They don't want to pay those large amounts of money, but they still just want to have that current popular sound that resonates with a demographic. Or sometimes an older sound, right? It could be like kind of an older 60s or 70s rock sound because they want to sell it to maybe an older demographic. And that's where they'll reach out to people like me and hopefully you. We can kind of be that sort of quote unquote cheaper alternative to going and, licensing an Eagles song, which might cost them $100,000. We may be able to provide something like that that feels authentic to that, but for a fraction of the cost and still a lot of money for us, okay? There are also some unique genres, and I'll talk about those as we get into this presentation, that are pretty much only featured in production music, which is kind of cool because if you're a producer or a composer, some of these genres you've never even tackled, you never even dipped into, but when you're in sync licensing, you get to try some really cool, interesting new sounds and new genres that'll actually make you a stronger producer overall, and we'll talk about that, okay? So what is the purpose of production music? This is the most important thing. If you take nothing else from this presentation, this is it. The only thing that we should be focusing on and doing with our production music is delivering an emotion, and a very clear emotion, okay? I've reviewed thousands of songs. I've given a lot of feedback to a lot of producers, and I've obviously been in this business for over 13 years now. So this is the one thing that either helps producers really skyrocket and do well and get a lot of placements, or holds them back and has them not really understanding why they're either not getting accepted by libraries or why they're getting accepted but not getting placements. Is because your track really, the purpose of a track in a library is to have a clear definite emotion that when somebody clicks play on it, they get that emotion loud and clear. So let's say it's a dark, tense, fight scene that they have in a reality TV show, and your track has that dark tension in it. And right when somebody clicks play, they feel like their heart rate increases. They feel a little more on edge, kind of on the edge of their seat. Your track is going to get placed versus the other composer who has kind of a mixture of it. It sounds like there's some tension in there, but it also has some light-hearted optimism kind of mixed in. It's kind of a blend of a bunch of different emotions, and it's a little vague and not really sure where it wants to go. Those kind of tracks do not get placed. The ones that are trying to be all things to all people, they do not get placed. It's the ones that are very sure of where they are, and they're very specific, and they're very niched down to a particular emotion. And it's any type of emotion you can really think of: being happy, being joyous, being sad, being mad, being angry, being combative, being adventurous, optimistic. It doesn't matter. You name an emotion on an emotional wheel, and that's the type of music that somebody's going to need for their production, okay? Obviously, as there is a show, a reality show or something like that, having some music just even sometimes in the background pumping away, it will just keep the viewer's interest. It'll keep them a little bit more glued to their TV screen. Music sometimes has this hypnotic ability to do that, to kind of just keep your interest there, and to not have the scene maybe feel as empty or maybe as uninteresting as it might be. So sometimes music helps to fill in some of those gaps and keep the viewer watching. And of course, that's the whole business of TV. They're trying to deliver a lot of viewers to their advertisers, so they need to keep their viewers' interest there, right? And of course, all of this, your music is going to be hopefully increasing the production value. So yes, Nike could come out with a commercial where, a 13-year-old kid using a Casio keyboard composed the melody, and maybe that would be cool for some reason or another, or just used a whole bunch of GarageBand loops. But it might cheapen the look and the feel of that particular commercial, or Nike as a brand in general, right? So this is very particular, very specific, and applicable to brands for advertising. High quality music and really well produced music bleeds off and sort of helps cement how people view the brand there. So if they have low quality, not so great sounding music, people will start to associate your brand with kind of a cheap, not so great brand. So you definitely are going to be hopefully providing some increased production value for whatever placements you get, okay? So what genres are we doing in production music? Well, any genre really can get placements. That's very true. However, I've always pushed back on people that wanted to get into really, really tiny specific things like, a specific type of like death metal or polka music, or, something that's a little bit too niche. I always push back against that, because you can get some placements, but they're not that often, okay? The most used ones are, and this is the ones that I've seen, and especially from contacts and people that I know in this business, rock and pop, EDM, hip hop, corporate, and orchestral. And I've actually done all of these. Hip hop, the least of all of these, but the other ones I've actually done a lot in. Rock, I'll tell you, rock and EDM for me have done the best, but that's, I do a little bit of pop music. I'm not a huge pop producer. Corporate basically just means sort of like easy listening, kind of safe sounding music, uplifting usually, can be really great for commercials, advertising, corporate videos, that kind of thing. Orchestral can include anything from like trailer music, which is its own animal, its own beast. I don't even mess with that. You got to be really, really dedicated to that. To some sort of like just background music for reality shows, which can be kind of orchestral in nature, or maybe just a competition show, which is used all over the place, right? But these are the ones for sure that if you're going to take this seriously and you want to at least try to create some significant source of income for yourself, maybe not full time, but just a good chunk of income, these are the ones that I recommend that you really, really dive into. At least take a good chunk of your time going into those directions, okay? Now, here's a few that only stand out in production music that you don't really see so much like on popular charts or anywhere else. Minimal and tension music. So minimal basically is what it sounds like. You only have a couple of instruments playing throughout the entire piece. So you might just have a low bass, pulsing sound, tiny little percussion, and maybe a piano. So like a 3-instrument track. And you hear that and you think, well, that's where I'm going to go, because that'll take the least amount of time to produce. It's super easy. I'll get lots of placements and I'll just get into this industry faster. Not so fast. That is a deceptively very complicated genre to get into. I've done a lot of it, and I can tell you I made the same mistake. I thought it was going to be super easy, Believe it or not, it's actually harder in some ways to create high quality licensable. You can create minimal music that's not going to get placed, but if you want to create music that's going to be placed, it's actually one of the more trickier ones, and I'll talk to you about why that is. But you really have to have a great sense of composition and dynamics with that. So you cannot just loop your way through a 2-minute long piece and say, hey, there you go. You can, you're just not going to get any placements. So you definitely have to spend a little bit more time with that one. Tension is essentially any one of these genres. It could be rock tension, pop tension, EDM tension, hip hop, any genre added onto tension can be done. So tension essentially is just getting you on the edge of your seat, as I said before. So it's just something that's basically rhythmic, it's pulsating, it's pushing forward, but it can transcend basically and include any of these other genres as well. And that's something that you might hear a little bit here and there on the charts, but it's not really its own thing. When you go to music library websites, they will have their own subcategory called tension music, and sometimes it's even broken up into these other genres, but it's definitely one of its own standalone genres that you won't probably find anywhere else. As I said before, the niche genres, the little tiny ones, the ones that are like, oh, I do, kind of rockabilly music with a little hip hop influence. And it's like, yes, you can definitely get your foot into a door. You can certainly get accepted by a library, but go watch TV. Do you hear a lot of that style of music on there? If you do, then maybe you got something. But if you don't hear a lot of it, I think a lot of producers think because they're one of the few that can produce the style of music, then they're going to have this great opportunity to get all the placements. Well, it's like if there's one placement a year for that style, then yeah, you'll get all of those placements. You'll get that one placement. So I would just say you once in a while we'll dip into these niche genres, which I have, and usually you'll do it after a library asks you to do that. I don't think just trying to come up with your own idea of doing this stuff. You should always be talking to a library that you're working with. Hey, do you think I should try this kind of experimental sound? Do you think you could actually get some placements? It's always better to have that conversation rather than just going off on your own and producing something that you would think is cool and unique, okay? So what qualities of music are in production music that transcend, no matter what genre you're working in, one of the major ones I talked about or a niche one, what qualities are you going to find in common with all of it? These are the ones that I've narrowed it down to, okay? First and foremost, and the thing that you should always keep in mind is that every style of production music will always build and evolve, meaning usually it starts in kind of a mellow place and it grows, meaning you'll have new instruments coming in, more drums coming in, a new lead, maybe we go from a bridge or a verse to a pre-chorus to a chorus. When we come to that next verse, it's a little bit bigger than the first verse, so we're still building and building and building. And it evolves. So you definitely want to stay away from the idea of I can just loop my way through this track. A lot of beat makers do this because when you are selling your beats to a rapper, you can have 16 or 32 bars, which are exactly the same because you're just sending it to a rapper. They're putting the changes and the forward momentum with their voice and their vocals and their lyrics. But if you're doing instrumental music primarily, which is what I've done in this business, you've got to provide all that forward momentum yourself through the music. And that means that every 4 to 8 bars, you got to be adding and developing and moving things forward, including if you're going to have a chord progression, it probably wouldn't be wise sometimes to have a quick, 4-chord progression, bum, 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 and repeating that so quickly. You might want to extend your chord progressions to be 8 bars, 16 bars, sometimes even 32 bars long, so that naturally the track does not feel loopy, okay? So you definitely want to create the sense of forward momentum and dynamics, that we're moving up, and usually the end of your track is going to be the loudest, most triumphant part. And of course, there'll be exceptions to this rule, but this is usually what you're going to see. Really important that whatever track you're composing, stay in the same emotion or mood that you started in. This is one of the biggest things that I give a lot of feedback on is I hear producers that start off with this great, tense, dark, awesome, kind of gnarly sounding track, and then halfway through it, we're suddenly kind of quirky and funny, and it's comedic. It's you kind of shot the chances of your track getting placed because now if somebody's going to place your track, they have to have a scene that has both of those. They have to have a scene that starts off dark, ends really funny. Sometimes that happens, but more than likely how it works is there's just going to be a scene that's dark and tense, and somebody who needs a track for it wants an entire song in that emotion so they can pick and choose, hey, we want a little bit of this verse, a little bit of this pre-chorus, and this chorus is really good for the big conflict that we have at the end of the scene. Then we like to go back to this verse, and this is how you're going to get placements. They're rarely ever just going to take your track start to finish and throw it into a TV show. They're going to Frankenstein and chop up the hell out of your track, which is great because you're giving them all those options to place how they need to. But you shouldn't be trying to, hey, I'm going to create an arc, going from one emotion to this other emotion and hoping that that's going to get me more placements. Again, you're trying to be too much to too many people. The only exception to that is if a library tells you, like I've had some of these opportunities where they'll say, start off in kind of a sad, reflective place and end in a glorious, triumphant like finale, because we're going to do a lot of sports promos and pitch to sports advertisers with this album. Okay, if a library tells you they want that kind of change, that emotion going forward, then deliver that. But if you haven't been requested of that, stay in one or the other, okay? And you'll find a lot of that is what they do with production music. Generally, and there's exceptions to this rule, you'll find that libraries will want your tracks to be between 1 and 3 minutes long. I have found that 2 to 3 minutes is actually the usual norm, but some libraries you can get away with 1.5 minutes, sometimes even 1 minute long for the entire queue. So you need to obviously do your research and find out who you're submitting to and look at what kind of tracks and how long their tracks are. If you haven't done your research on music libraries, many different ways to do it. However, the smartest and fastest way is to go into SyncEdge, which there'll be a link below if you want to go check that out. But SyncEdge is where I recommend these music libraries, so you can go find them, do your own research, listen to their music, see what they're accepting, so that you have a better idea of what you should be doing with your music moving forward, okay? And really importantly, your tracks really should just quickly deliver the goods, and the goods are essentially, what is your music really all about? What mood is it delivering? What emotion are you in? What style are you in? Are we supposed to be dancing with your music? Are we supposed to feel really sad with your music? Like, what is the point of this track? And you should be really getting to that track within a couple of seconds of it starting, okay? So this is not the industry for you to create a 4-minute long swell intro with a experimental pad soundscape to really set the mood before you get into the really good music. We don't need any of that, okay? You can do that in your personal time. You can do that to throw it up online and try to get people, in the public to be into that. But we're creating production music, which means it has to be useful and valuable. So these long meandering intros and long meandering outros, not needed in this business. We need to get, boom, right into what is this track all about. And when we're done with it, usually you want to have that boom hit ending. You don't want to have a long, ridiculous fade out, which is not going to serve anybody's purpose, okay? So let's talk about it. If you are new to this industry and you don't know anything about how to produce, sorry, it still says royalties. I should have changed that at the top. It's still production music is what we're talking about. How do you produce production music? How is this all done? First, what you should do is watch, or really what that means is listen to TV or streaming services, okay? This is the best research you can do. This is essentially current market research. What's better than that, than just guessing and hoping that you're doing something right? Go watch some TV shows, go watch some commercials, go watch some movies, go watch anything that you feel you could bring some value to, and listen to what kind of music is being placed. And that is going to generally show you what production music really is all about. And you'll hear a lot of things that'll clue you into, oh, that's where I should maybe go with my hip hop music, or that's the style of EDM music I see getting a lot of placements, or that's the kind of rock that really does well. You'll start to notice a little bit of some patterns in the different genres, okay? Use reference tracks. Reference tracks are essentially the tracks that are in these libraries. So hopefully you've done your research, you know the website, you know what kind of library you want to work with. So go check out some of the music they've already accepted in the genre that you want to produce and use it. Say, okay, well, there's a 1.5 minute long dark tension track. I want to create some tension music. How did they start their track? How did they build it up? How does it evolve? What quality instruments are they using? How many instruments are they using? What do their chord progressions do? What do their leads do? How do they work their percussion? How are they mixing everything, right? How does the track begin? How does it end? It's better to follow along with all of that than to hope you're creating something that's really going to be useful, because that is essentially your blueprint. That's your answer, your cheat sheet to what's going to be accepted by the library. So why not go directly to the source of what's already been accepted, okay? Use Sync Academy tutorials, okay? If you are in Sync Academy, you have access to over 120 hours worth of tutorials specifically on this topic on how to create licensable production music. So take advantage of this really powerful resource. This is stuff that's created by me, been at this for a long time, it's including other sync licensing professionals that do this full time. So you're getting sort of many different perspectives on how to create licensable and proven. These are tracks that have been placed multiple times. So obviously you're getting, again, another insider look into how to make some really powerful stuff. And I really think this is kind of a long-term thing to always keep in mind, that you always want to use and keep an always a student attitude, okay? Even though sometimes after you've been doing this for maybe a year or two, you can kind of start to feel, well, I sort of get it. I get the formula. Okay, I got it. And I ran into this, 8 years into my career where I was feeling really burned out and kind of feeling like I wasn't challenging myself enough. So you want to avoid that by putting on a hat saying, I can always learn to do things better, and I can always experiment. I can always try a new sound, a new genre. I can try to maybe mix and blend something. I can talk to my library to find out what exactly they need, and maybe something I can do a little differently. So to avoid burnout, that's why I'm talking about this, is because there is a formulaic approach to this. I don't want to, mislead you guys. There is a formula to creating production music, especially when you get really good at one particular genre, in the beginning of your career. So to avoid that burnout, you want to once in a while stretch and push some muscles and challenge yourself to write music in a different way, and check out some different types of reference tracks or artists or whatever. But always keep this idea that, like, if you feel like you figured it out, then there's nowhere for you to go but down. So always assume you don't have it figured out. Always assume that there's more to learn, and that will always keep you sort of enticed and, just kind of entertained and excited about continuously putting out new music for your libraries, right? All right, so a couple of key points before we wrap this up. Remember, you must create music for a library's clients' needs. So the libraries who you're submitting to, but it's their clients. They're the ones that are putting together the reality shows, the commercials, the movies, the trailers, all that kind of stuff. It's their stuff. It's their productions that you're creating music for. So yes, you need to have some original creativity, some excitement, some passion that's there. But if it's not going directly to the needs of these people, it's not going to do you any good. It's not going to do them any good, and you're just wasting a lot of time. So always try to keep in mind the bigger picture here of this needs to be music that's useful for somebody, okay? I encourage you, spend some time thinking about which genre you want to produce, but you want to really focus on a genre that's profitable, okay? So you might really love a really, out there sound or out there genre that's just like close to your heart because you grew up with that and that's really what you want to do. Okay, go for it to a certain extent, but just remember, if you're going to go down those really narrow paths, just know that your chances of getting large numbers of placements and really huge placements are smaller than the next guy who's putting in just as much work as you, but just producing mainstream rock music or mainstream EDM or hip hop or whatever it is, right? So spend some time thinking about this, that you're not going to be stuck with one genre the rest of your career. I don't want you to think you're going to, but when you get started, you really should focus on one genre that you're really great at, that you could be excited about, that you could see yourself growing into for many, many years. As your career goes on, you will expand, as I have, into many, many different genres. So you absolutely will do that. But in the beginning, really focus, I think, on something that is going to be, you'll love it, you'll be excited about it, and it can land you large numbers of chances to get as many placements as possible, okay? And no matter what you do here, always focus on the emotion of your music, okay? So this is actually more important than your mix, more important than your mastering skills, more important than, basically any dynamics or any sort of building of the track or anything like that. However you get to the emotion, as long as it's clear, as long as it's impactful, and as long as it's compelling, nobody cares how you got there. And I don't care what DAW you use. I don't care if you're still using an MPC, you're still recording with cassette recorders. I don't care what you're doing. If the emotion is there and the library can feel that emotion, and most importantly, the clients can really feel that emotion, then you're going to be getting the placements. That's really all that matters. It's basically a thumbs up, thumbs down kind of a business. If you create a track or an album and you're saying that this is sort of celebration, uplifting, fun, party music, EDM party music, and when people click on it, they feel depressed and bummed out and awkward and unsure and uncomfortable, then you're not getting the placements, okay? So you have to be delivering that emotion, that mood that you said you want to deliver with whatever it is that you're putting out there. So always come back to this. If you get lost, you're not sure, you're freaking out, you're hours or weeks into an album, and you're not even sure if you're really on track or doing something that's useful, always come back to this reminder. Am I nailing the emotion that I want to nail? And as long as the answer is yes, you are definitely going on the right track. I can't guarantee you it'll get accepted by a library. Of course, there are so many variables with that. But if you're creating music that delivers an emotion, you're doing your job. That's what our job is primarily here in the production music world. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this answered some of your initial questions about production music. Anything I missed out on, of course, go ahead and comment below. I'll be happy to answer those as soon as possible.